Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day one of CogX. Today, we are going to be talking about how generative AI is going to change everything, right? So the soundtrack of our minds has been something like this for the last few months.
AI, generative AI, generative AI, generative AI, AI as AI. It uses AI to bring AI.
And that's all you need to know about industry transformation in AI, right? Generative AI, it seems that it's been non-stop over the past few months. But what is generative AI anyway? And 2022 was really the coronation year for generative AI. You can conceive of it as a new type of AI or emerging new capabilities of artificial intelligence, which have been nascent, I would say, for the last half decade or so. And beyond the reason it's different from traditional AI, because AI has actually been in our lives for a long time, right? Is because generative AI, the clue is in the name, it moves beyond the simple labeling or categorizing of data to actually generating or creating new data. Now, like I say, 2022 was the coronation year for generative AI. It was the year the term was actually coined. Why? Because over the last kind of 12, 18 months, we've seen the rise of so-called foundational models that have been absolutely changing the game when it comes to AI's capabilities. These foundational models, conceive of them as being absolutely vast, okay? They have huge training data sets. You can think of the training data as almost the entirety of the internet. Another thing that makes them really special is that they're not task-specific. So whereas in the past, you might have had an AI model that could do one thing, for instance, learn how to play chess. Generative foundational models are not task-specific. They can be applied in a multitude of tasks. And the final reason they are just so pertinent is because kind of human is the new programming language for these foundational models, meaning we can interact with them by using prompts, right? Because they are built with this layer of NLP, so-called natural language processing. And over the past 12 to 18 months, these were the foundational models that came to the fore. I'm sure you guys have already heard of them. OpenAI's DALL-E 2, it only came out in March last year. Stability AI Stable Diffusion, which came out in August of last year, and Midjourney. Now, all of these are foundational models that generate images. And again, because human is the programming language, they generate images with a human prompt. Now, here's an example. This is an audience at Magazine London learning about how AI is going to transform industry. Right? So that is something that I just generated with DALL-E as I was preparing for this talk. But we can't talk about generative AI and its capabilities for industry transformation without talking about, I would say, the most significant class of foundational models, so-called large language models. Now, these are the foundational models that generate and interpret and work with text. And of course, the most important foundational model of them all when it comes to LLMs is the one and only ChatGPT. Kind of crazy to think that ChatGPT isn't even 1 year old. But when you think about generative AI, you could almost think of it as being the pre-ChatGPT and post-ChatGPT era. Why? It isn't that OpenAI was the very first to pioneer so-called large language models. Some of the earliest breakthroughs started at Google in 2017. But it was OpenAI that decided to release this interactive iteration of a large language model, so-called ChatGPT, which completely took the world by storm. And here we can begin to quantify it, right? So if you look at the time on this chart for different platforms to reach 1 million users, I mean, it took Airbnb, I think it's 14 years, no, Netflix, 14 years. It took Facebook 10 months. I mean, ChatGPT reached 1 million users within 5 days. Now, at the time, that made it the most popular application in the history of the world. The next closest thing was TikTok, and TikTok even took close to 8 months to reach 1 million users. I made a prediction last year that 2023 would be the breakthrough year for generative AI, meaning this would be the year of mass adoption. And I said that by 2023, these foundational models would be accessible to hundreds of millions, potentially even billions of people. Now, when I made that prediction last year, it was met with some derision from some quarters being like, okay, we'll see about that. This is going to be like the next metaverse. It's all going to be hype. But within 2 months of ChatGPT coming out, right? So this is by the end of January this year, it had reached 100 million users. And again, this is just one single application of a large language model, which is just one type of foundational model for generative AI. Now, off the back of this, when you talk about industry transformation, a really good kind of bellwether for how this is going to go is to watch what all of big tech is doing. All of big tech, over the course of the last year, has strategically reoriented to make generative AI a core part of their strategy, to own part of the tech stack, right? Either the infrastructure, the cloud, the platforms, or the applications. So all of these companies, Microsoft, primarily through their partnership with OpenAI, NVIDIA, Google, Amazon, AWS, Meta, and Apple are heavily invested in generative AI. And remember when the year began, the kind of market news wasn't that optimistic, but instead you've seen a huge rally in the S&P 100 and global economy because AI has kind of been leading that charge. NVIDIA is one of my favorite use cases. Here you see on the graph kind of the rising valuation of NVIDIA stock, which has, of course, become one of the elite trillion-dollar companies thanks to its bet on generative AI and being basically the one company in the world that can manufacture the chips that are needed to process all these generative AI computations. I think they have over 80% of market share. But all of the other big tech companies, like I say, have done this unprecedented kind of reorientation to generative AI. And why? Because they understand the immense enterprise value that's going to be created by this new technology. And to get a sense of that, we can also look at this infographic here, right? So I've been following what's now become known as generative AI for 6 years. And actually, the story started with deep fakes. That was the first actual viral kind of application of generative AI long before it was coined, when it became possible for AI to create something new, generate new data. The first thing that people made was memes and pornography, because that's where, when it comes to technology, porn is often the pioneering use case. But over the last 12 to 18 months, if you look at this infographic, and this infographic is already out of date, you can see the multitude of companies that are starting to build generative AI apps. Because again, if you consider that this is technology that can generate or create new data, its applications are numerous, right? From video generation, code generation, text generation, machine learning platforms, gaming, data, search. So really the utility for industry then. People often ask me, what industry is this going to affect and change? And you see some of the kind of debates around the creative and entertainment industry. But actually, that's just one of the first industries to be affected by generative AI, because all industries are going to be affected by generative AI, because the utility is about creation, about entertainment, about instruction, efficiency. as well as insight, right? So all of these companies here on this infographic basically didn't exist 18 months ago, and it's estimated that the entire space will be worth 200 billion by 2030. Now, I actually think it's going to be worth a lot more than that, again, when you consider the sheer utility that generative AI presents. Now, when we talk about industry, one of the big driving forces, or one of the most pertinent debates, is going to be this question of, okay, so now you have AI that can generate or create data, right? And it can create outputs that we were told until fairly recently, this is the exclusive domain of human intelligence and creativity. But already, these nascent foundational models can create art that looks like it was created by a human. It can create text that looks like it was written by a human. By any modicum of human intelligence, such as standardized tests, you already have these large language models that can beat human performance. So what we were taught was the exclusive domain of human creativity and intelligence. All of a sudden, you have machines that can compete in that arena. So one of the big questions is going to be, and I'm sure many of you in the room have already thought about it, is this AI going to augment me, or is it going to automate me? And there is no doubt, if you think about how this will be applied to all knowledge work, right? White-collar jobs, things that we didn't think could be automated, whether that's programming or strategy recommendations or marketing, that AI can now be deployed seamlessly as an additional layer on all knowledge work. So there will be huge transformation. So from this report, which came out from Goldman Sachs in March, it was predicted that generative AI, so generative AI alone, would augment or automate or replace at least 300 million jobs. Now, of course, it's wrong to think about this as being an autonomous agent and AI is going to take your job and you're not going to have a job in future. But is it true to say that the entire future of work is going to be disrupted by artificial intelligence and certain elements of processes of knowledge work will now be overtaken by AI? Absolutely. So the future, I think, is one of disruption. Also really interesting, however, going back to this question of is it going to augment me or automate me, there's going to be huge, huge augmentation and economic abundance as you can quantify through the productivity gains, right? Really interesting for lots of countries, especially in the West, where you have a declining demographics, low productivity level, how AI will be able to boost that. So this is another report which came out in the summer from McKinsey. I was at the report launch where they quantified how generative AI, just generative AI, could boost productivity in just 63 different use cases. And they came up with this figure. It could add an additional value of up to $4.4 trillion a year. Now, that's twice the GDP of the United Kingdom, so that is a pretty punchy number. I think it's fair to say that there will be immense abundance, like I say, generated by artificial intelligence. Because really, when you think about what is happening at this moment with artificial intelligence, I think we stand on the cusp of a technological revolution which is going to have a more profound and seismic impact than the internet itself. So if you think about the technologies of the past 30 years that have utterly transformed what it means to live, what it means to work, and what it means to be human, starting with the internet, going to cloud, going to smartphone, I think generative AI is going to be even more profound. Because those technologies of the past 30 years have more or less been about building the digital and also physical infrastructure, right? To build this digital ecosystem in which we now all exist and work in. But with AI, it takes it one step further. It's taking the information revolution and adding another layer. It's adding real intelligence. Again, going back to the capabilities of generative AI to produce output that we thought was only unique to human creativity and intelligence. Now, of course, when faced with something that seems as seismic as this, autonomous machines, intelligent machines, all stuff that basically was talked about in science fiction, which now seems to be coming true, the narrative for the past few months since ChatGPT came out, since generative AI has really been having this year of mass adoption, the dominant narrative, especially in the media, has been around this scenario, AI death, right? This is the scenario, the so-called AGI scenario, where the machines become more intelligent than humans, we lose control, and actually then it becomes an existential threat. So there have been a number of letters and initiatives, such as this one, which came out in March this year, where all the luminaries of the tech world, including Elon Musk and Steve Wozniak, were warning about the existential risks of AI and saying, hey, we need to just have a moratorium. We need to ban AI development until we can kind of figure out what's going on here. Whilst it's really important to understand that there is an existential risk connected to artificial intelligence, I would say at this stage we are so far from reaching AGI, or that the worst use cases of AI are going to be manifesting in an autonomous agent, that you have to take these warnings with a pinch of salt. Consider the fact, for instance, that Elon Musk, he was one of the luminaries who was calling for a ban on AI for 6 months. At the same time, he was buying as many GPUs or chips to kind of compute these AI things as he could get his hands on. And he was saying, oh, harder to buy than drugs, to release his own version of ChatGPT. So whilst the debate has often been oscillating around, okay, AI is going to kill us, and it is a hypothetical existential risk we should engage with, know that most AI researchers don't think that is the main risk with AI, and that we're not, close to AGI or AI autonomous death anytime soon. And also look at what's happening with the market. While we're having these debates, key players who understand the magnitude of what's coming, and I would say look at all the big tech companies, are owning all of the tech stack and the infrastructure to capture some of that huge enterprise abundance that we talked about. So they, like I say, big tech with AI is becoming more like mega tech. Now, another trend is that we're oscillating from AI death now into another narrative, which is AI is a dud. Because what we're starting to see, and perhaps some of you in this room have already kind of thought about how you could integrate ChatGPT, that seems to be obviously the most popular LLM, into some of your business processes. And then you kind of understand that it's harder to do than you thought, right? It isn't just this all-sentient god that you can plug into your processes. You need to have the right training data. You need to have people who know how to build these systems. So quickly, the narrative has gone from it's going to kill us to this is just a dud. And I think that narrative is going to be amplified over the next few months, because to actually integrate it in a way that really gives you value in your business is going to take a little bit of work. But I still believe it is the most transformative technology we've known. It's just that it's not an autonomous agent. But here are my 3 reasons as to why I think you should lean in to what's happening rather than being afraid of it, especially as a business person, right? First, let's just get real. We have to accept the magnitude of what's happening. This transformative technology is here. It's not going away. But understand both its limitations as well as its potential. Second, help yourself, whether as an individual or as a leader in your organization. If AI is deployed, and of course, like I said, it's going to take a little bit of research. You can't just switch on a button and be like, AI, do everything now. But deployed effectively into your organization, it can be a tremendous ally. Because again, think of it as the most augmenting force for human intelligence creativity. We already looked at what the productivity gains would be. It is industry agnostic, can be applied into almost any part of your work process. And third, help your community, because only after you understand what the capabilities of this technology really are, and we get away from the narrative of it's going to kill us or it's meaningless, can you be part of the vanguard that is building this movement to deploying artificial intelligence ethically and responsibly. And I know there's a lot of conversation about regulation, and I'm sure you guys are going to have that as well as ethics, but we actually have a responsibility, especially as leaders of industry, to think about how to do this ethically and responsibly. And finally, I just want to make one last point. Let's watch this. It's no exaggeration to say that in our lifetime, we're going to experience more tech-led change than the entirety of humanity that came before us has experienced collectively.
I don't think that we are going to prevent the use of artificial intelligence either in entertainment or any other industry. I think it's going to actually become a fundamental part of knowledge work and creative work going forward. This kind of AI-generated content is absolutely going to inundate the information ecosystem. We can conceive of it as us being now on the cusp, I think, of a profound change in our relationship to machines that's going to transform the way we live, transform the way we work. It's even going to change our experience of what it means to be human.
So even though I think this technology is going to transform the way we work, and indeed, if you're thinking about this in industry, that's very important, there's a bigger backdrop, right? And I think that this is one of the most profound tech-led changes that society has ever faced. So ultimately, this isn't just a story about industry transformation. It's a story about humanity. And we have agency in deciding how this technology is going to be deployed, whether that's in our companies or within society. And I think that over the next few months and years, we all have a really important role to play. And with that, thank you very much for your time.